for people unfamiliar with you, please just tell us your name, your background, and what you've been doing for the last 20 years.
Sure. My name is Eric Merola. My background, actually, I've been trained as a fine artist. I had a pretty successful career right out of college as a painter, which took me from North Carolina to New York City. And being a successful artist in Carolina and New York are two different worlds. So the short of it is I kind of quickly got seduced by commercial art and decent money. I ended up working in advertising, a lot of the big Madison Avenue famous ad agencies I worked for. I even worked for even our so-called enemies. I've worked for Philip Morris. I've worked for Merck Pharmaceuticals. I've been on that other side. But I've always had, as I got older, I kind of got a little bit of an activist bug about me. But I also got out of advertising a little bit and used my talents. I worked on some movies and some TV shows and some documentaries. And I kind of was always a fan of documentary work. I always kind of thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do your own documentary of my own? I never directed my own before. So I was in a lucky position because I knew how to edit, I knew how to shoot, I knew the right people to do music. I already had all those pieces. I never really found a subject worth doing. So it's kind of a long story, but I kind of stumbled upon Dr. Burzynski originally back in 2008, 2009, and just said, oh my God, I'm gonna do this. I don't know how, I don't know what's gonna become of it, but YouTube was still kind of getting started back then, and maybe I'll just throw it on YouTube, So as I got deeper, I found myself charging up more credit card debt, calling in sick to work. My wife's like, what are you doing? What is this thing? She knew, she was aware, but it was kind of a crazy venture to do, like give up this well-paid, these positions as a freelancer that I'd built for myself and roll the dice on this crazy idea of doing a documentary about a guy who created a treatment for cancer that everybody's trying to destroy. Like it seems nuts. So the short of it is, I got it done and it ended up being better than I thought it was gonna be. I mentioned in my talk here that I got a chance to show it to President Obama's chief of staff through like a mutual college buddy of his. And it was a very awakening moment for me because I got into this going, I'm going to change the world with this. People see this, they're not going to believe, I got a lot of people, the reasons why people start making these films, they just want to get this message out there. But I don't want to get too far into the story, but the short is, I had a really early moment of sobriety in the sense of realizing where we're at with this. And what I mean is, when you have the White House chief of staff see your movie and go, ooh, about a guy who has a treatment for cancer who went up against the Food and Drug Administration and beat them in federal court to win his ability to compete with the big boys just to get it through testing, just like any other free market thing we're supposed to be living within. And he sees it and goes, Obama's chief of staff sees it and goes, ooh, very important. This is just too big. Maybe in 10 years we could face this, but too big. And that was just such a really eye-opening moment because in a way, I get it, like being in that position. I'm a pragmatist at heart, even though we all have great, fantastic ideas on how we can improve or affect society, but that was just like, ooh. And it really helped me realize where we're at. Just because people find out about something doesn't mean change is going to occur. And if anything, if that thing that you're exposing can threaten such a huge establishment like a $4 trillion cancer industry, that can cause major disruption. So anyway, I'm going to go on this for a minute. So I did the math on this. I started thinking about it heavily. If you look at 15 million Americans in America, 15 million people in America with cancer, I know this from experience how much it costs because of family members that have had it. The lowball conservative average cost of care of a cancer patient, lowball conservative, maybe $250,000 over the course of their treatment. A few years, maybe longer, but that's the point. Some people, I've met pancreatic cancer patients that had $1 million bill. Medicare, Medicaid, insurance usually covers this stuff. It's not like it's coming out of their pocket necessarily, but you multiply $250,000 times 15 million people, that's nearly $4 trillion. That's humongous. So I understand what Axelrod's talking about. You also think about something like what Burzynski discovered, where it's not a magic bullet, but it's a safer alternative to chemo and radiation and far more effective based on clinical trial data the FDA supervised. It's not like a theory, it's been proven. And you realize what you're up against. You're like, oh my God, you're talking about taking away matching funds that the NIH gives to colleges and universities like USC or wherever that study cancer. Like you're disrupting That's something else I wanted to mention. Since I was a little boy, I've always was fascinated by new technologies that disrupt, new inventions, like any curious kid. And as I get older, like I thought it was fascinating to see how when Netflix came about, Blockbuster Video just laughed at them. They offered to be sold to Blockbuster for $50 million. They laughed at them. They're gone. Same with the internet, long distance companies. That always fascinated me. But what's interesting with medicine, free market isn't allowed to flourish the same way that Netflix and long distance companies were. That's not the same. So that's what also is fascinating about this. Like, here's this anomaly. Free market's free. Oh, but don't cure cancer. Oh, you got to be, no, that's not allowed. We can't have that on the market. Oh my God, So anyway, with that kind of armed with that knowledge that I learned just from this Axelrod experience and just like paying attention, I immediately kind of took a really pragmatic approach more than ever towards all my future films. So did Burzynski Part 1, I call it. It was on Netflix for a little while before like the sort of anti-Burzynski campaign was unleashed, because this thing was really famous, seen by a lot of people. I worked with Dr. Joseph Merola to kind of promote it. We put it online for free for a while. It just became this viral thing overnight. And mind you, I was one of the few people doing these kind of movies. There really wasn't much in the realm of these kinds of movies. That's way different today. They're everywhere, and that's wonderful. But that's another reason why I was so crazy, because everybody thought I was nuts. Even Burzynski, even people that were like supportive of the idea, like, no one's going to pay attention to this. You're going to get destroyed. You're never going to get distribution. Why are you doing this? You know what I mean? But I did. I managed to get on Netflix. I was on the documentary channel. It was everywhere. It was on PBS. And again, before the sort of like enemies or the sort of people against what I was doing came out to try to disrupt that, which they're really good at, I had a good run. And I had a lot of cancer patients that saw it come to me. So here I am with this movie that was really successful. I quit my job, thinking, okay, I think I might make a career out of this. I was given this access by default of all these terminal cancer patients who saw my movie were emailing me. So I'm not a physician. I can't give them advice. I just said, look, here's, Burzynski has a website. You just go there. You can contact him. Here's the number. If you decide to go, I'd like to follow you. Just it's up to you. And that's kind of what became Burzynski Part 2. So it was less controversial in the sense that you weren't talking about how the government was taking this guy down, and more just personal, where I followed patients. And that was mainly terminal cancer, brain cancer patients, all of whom were told to go home and die, and chose Burzynski's therapy instead. And I show all this, half of them lived, half of them died, so I showed all that. But anyway, that was Part 2. And then my third movie was a whistleblower story. And this, interestingly enough, was kind of what I wanted my first movie to be. To back up for a moment, it was a book I read called The Cancer Industry by a man named Ralph Moss. Living in New York City, long train rides home at night, working long hours. I always wanted a book in my backpack called The Cancer Industry. It's about a guy named Ralph Moss who worked at Sloan Kettering in Manhattan back in the 70s during the whole Laetrile craze. And Sloan Kettering was forced to test this because so many people were going to Tijuana to get it. So let me just finish my thought though. But in this book, it was about the story, which I'll expand upon, which is my third movie. But I had no documentary experience as a director. This guy was kind of well known, and he'd written a book. He was on TV, he was on 60 Minutes back in the day. So he passed. He said, you're not doing a movie about me. But in this book, The Cancer Industry, which was about his story, one of the revised versions had a little blurb on Burzynski because he had paid attention to him. And this book was revised back in the early 80s, still old, So that's what sent me down the Burzynski path, by the way. So everything comes full circle. Third movie, I did a whistleblower story about Ralph, because I had already kind of established myself as a guy that can make movies and get people to look at them, but it was different for me because it wasn't about patients and all this. It was a whistleblower story, kind of like the Edward Snowden, if you would, of this world, And since we're talking about it, 100,000 people a year were going to Tijuana to get Laetrile, this absurd apricot pit extract. This stuff is basically a throwaway waste product of the apricot canning industry in California. Like, why are people eating the apricot bits thinking you can cure cancer? It was, honestly, kind of chaotic. And even Ralph, being the PR guy at Sloan Kettering, also agreed, this is obscene, absurd. What is this weird mass hysteria over this apricot pit business in Mexico? So Nixon had declared the war on cancer back then. And since so many people, it was on the cover of Newsweek, people going to Tijuana, Laetrile this, Laetrile that. And Nixon, the head of Nixon's cancer panel, was also on the board of Sloan Kettering. So it was like, all right, we have to test this thing. Let's get to the bottom of this, let people understand this is all nonsense. They give it to their most trusted, longest scientist that had been at the center. He pioneered the idea of even using mice in testing a new cancer drug. He would catch mice with buckets in the basement of Sloan Kettering back before it was even called that and test new chemotherapeutic agents. This man, his name is Kamanatsu Sugiura. He was a Japanese citizen who, by the way, was considered so important for cancer research, and he was so old. After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, they hid this guy because so he wouldn't be detained, because he was that important to the world of cancer research. He also was a co-founder of chemotherapy, as we know it today. You love it or hate it, this guy invented it. And this guy that invented chemo basically was the one that was given the Laetrile testing duty. 5 years of double-blind mouse studies using Laetrile, the injectable kind, not the edible, eating apricot pits and injecting the apricot or the Laetrile that is extracted from it are two entirely different mechanisms of action. Eating apricot pits is not going to do anything, most likely, because once they hit the stomach and the enzymes, it disrupts it. It's not the same. So I just want to get that out there because people see it in my movie and they still don't get it. But 5 years of double-blind mouse studies, Laetrile stopped the spread of cancer 80% of the time. 80%. Never stopped a tumor from growing. It would slow it down, but it cured the name of the game, and that is keep the thing from spreading. So it was mice with breast cancer. They were trying to see if it would spread to the lungs. 80% of the time, it stopped it. So they're stuck. They're like, oh my God, we can't make this thing fail. They kept redoing the mice, buying different mice, trying to rig the studies. And they just couldn't get it to fail. So Ralph, being in public relations, he just studied classics. He wasn't a scientist. He studied like Greek, like he would read Homer with his wife, like in the original Greek language, like he was like PhD in classics, literature basically. And he got this great new job, worked for Sloan Kettering, and War on Cancer was just enacted. I'm contributing to society. He also agreed Laetrile was ridiculous, but because this guy, Sugiura, was such a fixture, Ralph, being the PR guy, was asked to write a story on him because he was close to he's getting up there in age. We need to do a big biographical piece on this guy. Ralph spends a lot of time with him and eventually asks, well, what are you doing today? And he goes, oh, I'm working on amygdalin. And he goes, amygdalin? That's Laetrile. Said, yep. Why are you working on that? It's nonsense. And this old Japanese man pulls down all these binders from all his years of study. So Ralph is like, oh my God. But anyway, I don't want to go on forever and tell you the whole darn movie. But the point is, the short of it is, Ralph, being the PR guy, knew the truth. And then when the time came where Sloan Kettering was forced to lie, guess who had they asked to write the press releases to lie about it? Ralph. Ralph was not going to have any of that. So he kind of lived this double life, and he created something called Second Opinion. He tried to do it the underground way and leak it anonymously, and it still wasn't working until he just blew the whistle. He just put himself out there. He got fired. And it's interesting. The book was pretty successful. He went on 60 Minutes back then because of the book, and he was on 60 Minutes, an hour-long interview. Like, he was so excited. He was like, here's my day. I can't believe it. All this work. I lose my job, American Cancer Society convinced 60 Minutes to cut him. There we go. Once again, this has been going on since the 70s. I mean, this kind of thing is not new to our world. That was my third movie. So, okay. So when I was finishing this movie up, by this point too, I had benefactors, a lot of people that were cured by Burzynski in the day. You do what I do. Eventually people with money start paying attention to you and they're like, hey, I can help you out if you need some help, because of course, there's not a lot of money in this. The first movie was on credit card debt. So what I'm saying is I've gotten to the point where I'll have benefactors that help me make these things. I'll say, look, I need this much money to get to A to B. I need to travel here, and I'll just raise it. Even if it's just getting my rent paid, whatever. But I did get some emails about fetal stem cell therapy, and everybody kept saying stem cell this, stem cell that. And to be honest, like most people, I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. And also, to be honest, I get my inbox filled with everybody under the sun with their next big idea for my next documentary. It just gets a little exhausting, honestly. So I kind of got lost in that, and it did. But one of my benefactors who had helped with some of my work just kind of said, you need to pay attention to this. I think you should, So the short of that is, that was in early 2014. So I spent the most of that year studying this subject, just researching it, talking to patients. I didn't even turn the camera on it, really. And here I am today, basically, where almost 5 years now, which is half of my documentary career. It's crazy to think about. Because I started working on this in 2008, 2009. Burzynski was released in 2010. Here we are in 2019. So 2009 to 2009, that's 10 years. And half of it, fetal stem cells. So it is honestly the holy grail of it all. Burzynski is clearly important, but here you have something that's, first of all, politically polarizing as can be. Like, people hate it. Half the population hates it just because it has to do with aborted fetuses, which I can get into. But of course, the other half is the market forces that never want to see this come to market. And it's also interesting too because, so you have both sides of the fence. Like, what a great thing as a journalist. You're like, oh my God, what an interesting thing to cover. You have this remarkable thing that can be scientifically basically proven that this is helping people. There's plenty of science, decades before these scientists even created this, to support the theory behind it. And then you have this abortion issue thrown on top of it. It's like, oh my God, it's like the biggest hot potato you can touch. And by the way, it's also convenient for the industry because it's so convenient for them because it'll never see the light of day, and especially in this country because of the abortion alone. They'll just use that as their tool all day. So, but stem cells overall, like when I did this movie, I got a chance to interview the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. So it's not just fetal stem cells they're pushing back against. This is the largest stem cell agency on earth. They're worth $8 billion. They were voted into existence by the citizens of California by some really well-meaning people to further the work of stem cell work. And they've been around for how long? Okay, been around for a while, not quite a decade. But their job, their only job, with all this billions of dollars, is to try to get stem cell therapy to the public. They can't do anything. The FDA is stopping them at every turn. And they're not even using, like, as I call the Rolls Royce of stem cells, fetal. They're using the lower end stuff that isn't quite as effective. They can't even get that off the ground. So all this near decade of work they've been going through, all this money behind them, the FDA is just roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And of course, to open a clinical trial, the system's used, the reason they cost so much money, there's an outrageous amount of money, because the pharmaceutical company is usually behind it. What pharmaceutical company wants to support a stem cell therapy when it doesn't fit the model? You can't patent it. What are you going to do? You're just going to be a philanthropist and spend $15 million on a clinical trial and release it to the world and say, oh, there you go, gift to the world. Sure, you'd like to think people will do that. They're not going to do it. So anyway, so what I'm getting at is the latest fetal stem cell film, The God Cells, and why I'm here today. And the whole stem cell space is sort of not only is exciting because it is the future of medicine. All the experts will agree, even if they won't say so out in public, all of them. We've been using chemicals to treat ailments forever. And that's been the old business model. Patent a chemical, get it patented, make sure the patent lasts a long time. But biology is on its heels, and that's what this is. And fetal is just sort of as I say, it's like the Rolls Royce in the parking lot surrounded by horse and buggies. It's all transportation. As I love to use that analogy. People hear stem cells and they think, oh yeah, my Gladys got stem cells and blah, blah, blah. And oh, I never heard about stem cells. Nope, you didn't get this. This is way different. And what's interesting about fetal too is that the experts and the media and everybody love to pretend it doesn't exist, which again makes my job even more exciting. I think I'm the only person on earth that has done a film about this. I really have looked hard. You can't find anything about this. You go to YouTube, I'm the only thing you're gonna find. You look fetal stem cells on YouTube, you'll see embryonic, which they think is fetal, or they think embryonic is fetal because everybody doesn't understand it. So, but I like to use in this analogy, it's like you watch a documentary about stem cells, or you read a book. Imagine reading a book about transportation, and they just forgot to mention the airplane or the car. That's what fetal is in this scenario. It's like, but they're doing it. Like, we don't need the car. Let's take that out of the history of transportation. That's what they're doing with fetal. No, too controversial. We'll take it out. Pretend like it doesn't exist. So.
Are there good quality studies on anti-neoplastons for cancer? What were the results of the studies?
With the Burzynski story, what's so amazing about the story is how he was even allowed to do the studies. So here's a guy, I'll get to the answer to the question, but here's a guy who fled communist Poland with this new peptide, strain of peptides he found in human blood and urine that no one had found before. As one guy liked to put it, it was like finding a whole bunch of new islands off the coast of Miami. Like, where the hell did these things come from? He didn't really understand how it related to cancer yet. He was just a superstar scientist back in his home country and didn't agree with the Communist Party. He was trying to get the hell out of there, honestly. And because he was such a superstar scientist, they wanted him more than ever in the Communist Party. So I think, if I remember correctly, like he either realized it had something to do with cancer before he left or shortly after he came to the US. But essentially, he flees communist Poland with $20 in his pocket. He spends most of it on airfare to get to his uncle's house in Jersey or whatever from JFK, just in the cab fare. And he ends up like getting a job at Baylor College of Medicine down in Texas. And he ends up getting grants by the National Cancer Institute to study this for cancer. Because somewhere along the line, and it's been a while since I'm a little rusty on the story, this part of it, but he realized it had something to do with cancer. Because that's what it was. He studied it in every age of person, the anti-neoplastons level, which is what they call the peptides, different races and different sexes and people with different diseases. And he found out that people with cancer seem to have a low count of these peptides. He was like, maybe this is somehow correlated. So the National Cancer Institute realized what he had. They were paying him. He got a grant from them, but they didn't own it. They just helping him financially. They offered to bring him into the fold. And you got to remember, this is a guy that just ran from bureaucratic craziness from Poland. He's not going to just believe, the next government. Do you know what I mean? So he kind of, quite honestly, courageously, and it's so fitting to his personality, which is why I think he's even survived as far as he has. He was stubborn and went, wonder if I can do this on my own. I don't need these guys. So he living in Texas, and Texas even today, but especially then, was like the renegade state. How many times they want to secede from America, And there was laws in place at the time where if you were a doctor and a scientist and you had an invention and you had your own practice, you were allowed to give, based on state law, a new experimental therapy to a terminally ill person within the state of Texas, as long as it didn't cross state lines. So he hired lawyers and figured this out. He's like, I'm going to open my own clinic. And he actually let the FDA know. He certainly let the Texas state know. But to be honest, I think they probably never believed in a million years this guy was going to cure anything. So in the late 70s, he opens up like a little clinic, a little strip mall, and he starts treating patients. And as you can imagine, these are people at death's door. They had like given up on everything. And they're like going to go to some Polish guy that hardly speaks English in some strip mall, you know what I mean? So he starts curing people. Not everybody, but, and so that happened, all hell breaks loose. So at the end of the 70s, all through the 80s, there's like FDA's filing injunctions against them. They're like trying to stop him in every turn. And Burzynski's just like saying, nope, not doing anything. I'm not going anywhere. They were filing grand jury after grand jury after grand jury. And as one guy said, you can indict a ham sandwich in the grand jury. They couldn't indict Burzynski. So to get to your question, the trials, they finally get him to court at the federal level in the 90s. And by the way, when they did that, the FDA, it kind of backfired on them before they were even done. Because at first they were like, we're taking all the patients off the therapy. And our patients lost their minds. He had a lot of patients at this point. They're down in DC, they're raising hell. The news, national news is covering this. So the FDA goes, oh God, I guess we have no choice. We have to open up clinical trials for this guy. At least until the trial's over, until we put his ass in jail. Let's open up clinical trials. So they open up clinical trials under FDA authorization and sanction. Like, that's all he ever wanted anyway. So he gets to the trial, first trial, not guilty. Boom, jurors are like, not guilty. FDA goes, oh, we're taking him back to court. So second set of jury. And by the way, the jurors from the first trial showed up at the second trial to protest the second trial because they were like, this is so ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. This guy's curing cancer. What are you guys doing? So Burzynski defeats them twice in court, and because of that, it blows up in the FDA's face, and off go the clinical trials, and they continue. Phase 2, not randomized, but phase 2 studies for anti-neoplastons. Yes, they had remarkable results. And the thing is, but like any study, you can only focus on a certain cancer type for the most part. And for basically, because brain cancer is like a death sentence, I mean, you're usually told this is inoperable, but it's all through your head. We can't take it out with surgery. We can fry your brain with radiation, and there's no chemotherapy that can do it because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. Sorry, get your things in order. Off to Burzynski they go. So he had a lot of a track record of brain cancer, just sort of by accident because of all the obvious. So that was kind of the focus of different types of brain cancer in most of these clinical trials. So he's cured glioblastoma. I've met these people. This is like what John McCain died of. This is what Ted Kennedy died of. He's cured it. It's hard to say the percentage, but I think it's a nice, decent to say 20 to 35% cure rate versus 0. And even the biggest, most famous politicians can't even be cured of it. Of course, they don't go to him, obviously. But more remarkable than that was what's called a diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, or DIPG. And what this is a very rare tumor that forms in the brainstem of children. Only 400 children per year are diagnosed with this in the US, maybe 40 per year in England. Rare. 90% of these children have ever been diagnosed with this are dead at 2 years. All of them, there's not a single survivor at 5 years, period, except for the ones that were in Burzynski's phase 2 clinical trials authorized by the FDA, anti-neoplastons. So when you ask me about percentages, that's got the most data behind it. So you're talking about a 30-ish% cure rate for something that is a death sentence. Like, it's never been done. You can't find a kid that's been cured of this. You just can't, they don't exist, except for Burzynski's trials. And some of these kids that were kids now have their own kids. It's unbelievable. But going back to your question, because he was the first one to cure this, and because the FDA still is like, we don't want this moving forward, we're the police of pharma, we've got to do our job, there's only so much they could do in this case. They had to greenlight phase 3 randomized studies for this, because he was the only, it's never been done. So this is really, I'm really glad you asked this question, because this is another big moment to understand what we're up against, okay? So here is a guy who owns his own pharmaceutical company, basically. The Burzynski Research Institute has a Burzynski clinic, who owns the medication, who has been given permission by the Food and Drug Administration to do phase 3 randomized studies for a type of brain tumor that's never been cured in history. A randomized study, if you don't know, is when you have 2 groups. And then, like, if it's a psychotic drug or like depression, they usually have a sugar pill against whatever. But in cancer, they can't do that. It has to be like standard of care in both groups, and then you add the new thing to one of them. And in this case, the only standard of care available for this brain tumor type was radiation. Never been a single chemical ever to touch this tumor. Radiation is all they got. So he had to just suck it up and had no choice but to open up a clinical trial for radiation in both groups, just add anti-neoplastons to it. He's like, what a nightmare. Now I'll have to raise $150 million to do it. Okay, so he agrees, paperwork signed off on, $150 million is being raised. And again, the guy who helped raise the $150 million is the same man that was David Axelrod's old college buddy. So that brings the story back to full circle. You ready? All of it's ready to go. And again, these are randomized studies. Burzynski has to step out of it. People are trained how to use the therapy. They're trained on the protocol. The final holy grail of testing for a therapy like this is when you hand it off to other oncologists so they can do it independently in a double-blind study. No one knows who's getting what. Of course, in this case, it's a little different because it's hard to not know. But I'm assuming what they would do is give them both radiation, then add sugar pill to this side or sugar injections, and then add real thing over here. I'm not really sure how they would handle that, but it never made it that far. Because every single children's hospital in the United States, you name them, St. Jude's, Boston Children's, all the big ones that you see on TV, they would not allow the phase 3 randomized studies for a type of brain tumor in children that has never been cured before in the history of humanity to be done on their property. Yeah. So you think, why on earth would that be? It's only 400 kids a year. What's the big deal? This is going to prove it for these kids. Have a heart. The problem remains to be this. Here's the problem. Let's say they let it go, all right? Maybe let's just say 1 kid got cured out of 50. Still huge. The point is, if FDA allowed this, this is interesting because the FDA said, okay, go ahead. Here you go. It was the hospitals that stopped it, all of them. If it was approved for market for a brainstem glioma for only 400 kids in this country, all right, that means if you got cancer or I got cancer of any kind, your oncologist or my oncologist has to, by law, give you anti-neoplastons if you insist on it. Instead of chemo and radiation, if you insist on it, even if your insurance doesn't cover it and you pay for it out of pocket because you can get it off label. Get it? So, does that make sense? So by approving it for something so rare and tiny, people think, what's the big deal? It's a really big deal because who in their right mind, who has not seen people go through chemo and radiation and everything else, who in their right mind isn't going to figure out and scramble, even if Medicare doesn't cover it or whatever, to find a way to pay for anti-neoplastons, knowing full well that if anybody that's looked at it, that A, your hair is not going to fall out, you're not going to get nauseous, you're not going to destroy your bone marrow, your gums are not going to go inflamed, all the crap that goes along with it. Oh, you're not going to get leukemia in 5 years from the chemotherapy because that's what happens to half the patients that go undergo chemo. And you're going to opt for anti-neoplastons. And if that fails, then you go the chemo route. That's the problem. That's right there. There's a $4 trillion problem. One man, Burzynski, could overturn a $4 trillion apple cart. So that's could have been my job to get to the root of it. Why? And so it's huge. So when you come to terms with that sobering moment of the Axelrod story, Again, I'm going to say it again. Boston Children's, St. Jude's. I mean, come on. These people are like, oh, save the children. Oh, not those children. It's like, we don't want to, we can't. So what we're looking at is not a lack of people knowing about this. They know about this, You're talking about something that can really disrupt livelihoods. People can lose jobs. Companies could go bankrupt. It could literally affect the economy, as Axelrod said. And imagine if $4 trillion, even if 10% of that was funneled to Burzynski, colleges would start shutting. I mean, it's just a nightmare financially. And that's where we're at. It's really a bummer. So and honestly, when all these kinds of things came in line for me, I went, oh my God, wow. And again, from a pragmatic point of view, I'm like, okay, my focus is not on trying to, because I've met with Congress people. Nancy Pelosi was on the ground helping out Burzynski back in the day before she rose to power. They all know about this. And by the way, a lot of them will get this therapy themselves, by the way. Reagan went to Tijuana to get Laetrile. Nancy wouldn't let him go to chemo after he had a surgery. I mean, they know about this. Politicians have gone to Kiev. So it's not like they don't know, but their job is to protect what has been established. This is one of my favorite things to say. We live within an establishment. It has been established. That's why it's called that. When a new president comes into power, I don't care what you think he's capable of doing. If anybody comes, their job is not to change what has been established. Their job is to protect that with their life. You don't change it. And if you think about anything in our world that has been a revolutionary invention, never has it come out of the establishment. Steve Jobs didn't come out of the establishment. Burzynski didn't come out of the establishment. I mean, think about things more less controversial, like say a Steve Jobs or anything. I don't know. The guys that invented the internet, a bunch of dorks in their bedroom, selling contracts to the military. I mean, these were not establishment folk. So, and it's interesting too, because something else I've kind of found that I'm proud of is like, we're all taught in school to like respect the Steve Jobses of the world. Look at that guy, look what he accomplished. But we're never taught to be like them. We're never taught to go against the grain and go and do what people tell us is impossible. That's what the Burzynskis do, and that's what like MSL is doing. And so what I'm getting at is I don't want to say stopped caring, but I stopped wasting my energy on trying to change it. What I want to do is help people know that this is here, that is there, that's good, that's bad, at least based on what I've known. So that's kind of been more fun, and it's less stressful, to be perfectly honest. Because I can't tell you, I used to be activism boy with this, and I really was on the ground helping to fight for Burzynski and all of that. And when you meet with enough politicians, you have enough Axelrod stories, and oh my God, and children's hospitals saying no, and wow, wow. So anyway, yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what my next project's going to be, but it's kind of, again, like I never ever did in the past, really. But I'm going to continue on the MCEL route, because what's cool is Ukraine is a country where it's legal. They're not Russia. They're not Europe. And it's kind of cool because they're isolated because they're still independent. So as they're able to just do their thing. I mean, if I can continue shedding light on what they're doing and maybe help change some lives by people being aware of them, or maybe save a few lives, who knows, That's where my strengths are and what I think my job should be, So.
Have you gone to the St. Jude's of the world and asked them for comment and so on?
No, I haven't done that. What we did kind of experiment with is there's an organization called Stand Up to Cancer. You may have seen that. Okay. Sure. Stand Up to Cancer is actually one of the more progressive cancer fundraising entities, if you would, because what Burzynski's therapy is, it's essentially a gene-targeted therapy. This is like a really long conversation, but the short of it is, the theory behind it is when you realize his peptide invention, when later on we mapped the human genome, and we started figuring out that there are certain genetic mutations involved with cancer. And he realized that his therapy was actually turning certain genes on and certain genes off to push cancer back into check and get rid of it. So it's almost, think of your body like a big switchboard, and you're turning switches on and off, and it's very complicated. Cancer is a complicated disease. So if you can kind of balancing act that idea, you can ideally knock it out. And again, it's like the same thing, like you can get rid of cancer like through surgery, but it doesn't mean it's not going to come back because that's genetic malfunction. And that's what Burzynski tries to do. But going back to what I was saying is, for fun, we kind of tried to apply, because all they do is stand up to cancer is like gene-targeted stuff. They wouldn't even talk to it. I mean, talk to anybody. But no. Oh my God, no way. No. So, no, I mean, I thought about having like sit-ins on the lawn of the FDA. I thought about all this stuff, as an activist. But what are they going to say? Here's an example. Sloan Kettering, what we did, because Ralph used to work there, when we opened in New York for that movie, This is based on your question with the Children's Hospital. This is the best answer I can give you, because I know I haven't approached the Children's Hospitals about this. Because it also isn't quite in your face like that either. It's like enough bureaucracy where it's isolated. They can go, what are you talking about? We never saw this study. Oh, send it along. Oh, what? Oh, we lost it. Oh, can you send it again? You'll just deal with that. You know what I mean? But Second's Opinion, Ralph's organization he kind of created, was actually also a newsletter. What started out as leaking documents, he called Second's Opinion, lateral studies. It was like this newsletter he was passing around this huge corporate office. And people were like really digging it because it was anonymous. So people were like, they had this anonymous chain of command to like find out who's behind it. And if you were clever enough, you could figure out who it was. And Ralph still had his sort of agents in the front. But it ended up becoming this like newsletter where people could like air their grievances against the company. So it ended up becoming more than just the laterals thing. And it went on for a while. That being said, I said, Ralph, let's resurrect Second's Opinion 30 odd years later for the opening in New York. And let's go out in front like you guys did back in the day and pass it out in front of Sloan Kettering. So we did. And we did we resurrected it. It was like, of course, much nicer today, color print, and and by the way, each one was a free ticket for any Sloan Kettering employee that wanted to go to the movie that evening, and some of them did. But we went at Sloan Kettering head on, all right? We even asked them openly, radio, we got a lot of radio coverage. We were like open, and then one side was the newsletter, the other side was an open letter. We gave away thousands of these. Emails were made, contact was made. They ignored this. They were deathly afraid of this. And it's funny too, that was our version of confronting them. And we just said, guys, just come clean. I know it was a long time ago. The same employees aren't even there anymore. The data's there, it's there. We have it, we have copies of it. It's in the movie, it's your oldest scientist. That scientist that did these studies is on the cover of textbooks for medical students on how to use mice. This is a famous figure. You know the truth, just come clean. If you want to keep your integrity, just come clean. They wouldn't budge. In fact, the opening night after we picketed, or we didn't really picket, it wasn't like a big to-do. We were just politely handing out. A couple of guys in suits came up to the screening, and they were really obnoxious. They're like the Sloan Kettering guys sat in the back. They were like, I'm going to see this stupid thing. And at the end, their faces were like white as ghosts. So that was interesting. Nothing came of that. This is fascinating, kind of anecdotal story. Like one of my distributors who helped distribute the movie, like Amazon Prime, et cetera, he was at a bar, like trying to hit on a girl, like just trying to talk to some girl. And he was like, well, what do you do? She said, I work for Sloan Kettering. He's like, yeah, what do you do? Oh, I'm a film distributor. And she just immediately goes, oh man, there's this movie. Whew. Second Opinion, we're all scared to death of this thing. So my distributor is like, yeah, that's my movie. I'm representing that. She's like, she like storms out. Anyway, so to give you an idea of what kind of behind the scenes thing I did. What's also fascinating about it too is I lived in New York City for a long time. And when it came out, I just moved to LA, so I came back. I lived there for over a decade, 13 years. I had never once in my life living in New York, riding the subway every day, have I ever seen a Sloan Kettering ad in the subway. Never. The opening week of my movie, they decided to plaster the subways with Sloan Kettering ads. So that's fascinating. So they would rather fight back than to admit wrong. You try to approach them and say, come on guys, do the right thing, or why'd you do this? They'll come back at you fiercer than you'd ever imagine. There's no like, oh, we're sorry, nuh-uh. Because they would have to admit wrongdoing, Even if the St. Jews acknowledged that they even had knowledge of it, they already just implicitly admitted guilt. So they're just going to pretend like they have no idea what you're talking about.
Who's in charge of the cancer industry, and what are their main goals and objectives?
Okay, I think we naturally gravitate towards like the good versus evil, black and white. Like we go after like the evil people. I've come to the conclusion that it's not really about evil people. I think maybe these people aren't necessarily evil. They're just doing the job they were given, and as horrible as it is, to protect this establishment. It's a systemic problem. It's bigger than just a couple of evil jerks at the top keeping the cure. Like, it's bigger than that. So who's in charge? It's interesting. It's because it's like you look at the president. Is the president really in charge of the country? Not really. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to say. It's not really the FDA. It's just sort of like this almost like unconscious understanding that when you get to that level of power in that world, that, again, going back to what I was saying earlier about the good, revolutionary, groundbreaking, disruptive stuff, you can't do that from that establishment. It's not allowed. And then when it does happen, it has to be whittled down to fit within the market. So what's interesting is that Goldman Sachs recently just is so many amazing. For years, you'd be called like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist to say they're trying to hide the cure for cancer, right? Goldman Sachs just flat out, it was just a few months ago, I think it was early in the summer last year maybe. I want to get this right, but you can look it up. It was like the New York Times and the Washington Post, something like really mainstream. They just said, we don't think it's good for the market to create a cure for cancer. They just said flat out. It's like, they really, I mean, you can look this up. If anybody watching this, just Google it, Goldman Sachs, cure for cancer, whatever. But it's getting to the point where they're just like putting it right out in front of you now. They're like, yeah. And, but it's like, I can almost, as dark as it sounds, understand where they're coming from. Because if they really need a cure for cancer, if they get it, they're going to find it. If they know how to figure it out, they'll find it. But their job is not to find it. Their job is to sustain this machine. That the CEO of Merck or whatever, a cure for cancer is his worst nightmare. I mean, think about it. I'm going to go down this tangent again. Let's just pretend for a minute that, they also, it's like the myth that a cure for cancer would be worth $1 billion. Yeah, for maybe a few years until it becomes a generic drug. Just imagine for you and I, we created a cure for cancer, right? We managed somehow to get it through testing without being destroyed. We get it on the market somehow, and we work for a big pharma company. Say we work for Pfizer. Say I'm a CEO, you're vice president. We're like, we're going to bring the cure for cancer to market. We just brought it to market. We have a bunch of the other cancer drugs that we've been getting profits off for years. Oh my God, it's been 12 years into it. Now patents are gone. Now it's generic like the antibiotic. You just destroyed yourself. You just put yourself out of business. What are you going to do now? Do you get it? I mean, so it would take a special person that would be so manipulative, because I almost think it would have to be a person capable of the same sort of quote unquote evils to hide one, to bring one to market. I really think it would take someone that knows how to manipulate this system on the darkest levels to even bring a cure for cancer up. They would have to do so much shady stuff to push this thing through. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So who's in charge? I don't know. I mean, it's bigger than that. It's just like this monster machine industry that has been created. And once again, going back to what I was saying earlier, is that you have innovators like, say, Steve Jobs with Apple. That's not really that controversial, because he also created a new market. He wasn't taking down an existing market. Netflix kind of took down an existing market, took out Blockbuster. The internet kind of took out an existing market with long distance, but the long distance companies, the smart ones, just started offering internet. Everything but just shifted. But it's different. With medicine, you're able to hide behind, it's so easy to hide behind, oh, that's quackery. You're giving people false hope. As soon as something competes with you, especially if it's good, oh, that's when they really tell you it's a bunch of quackery. It's like, if they go after something hard, like they have with me and Burzynski, you're onto something, because they don't waste their time trying to save people's lives. They could care less. What they're doing is saving their industry, is what we're trying to do. So again, this is the cigarette company started this. It's called astroturfing. If you go look at Wikipedia, look at my movies, it looks like I'm like the worst lying filmmaker you've ever heard, But that's what they do. It's called astroturfing, fake grassroots. So cigarette companies pioneered this idea in the late 90s, where the courts were going after them. They were like, no, they're not addictive. They're taking out our industry. They created smokers' rights groups. Do you remember this? Smokers' rights groups. Smokers want their rights. And it sounds like it's come from a bunch of proud smokers. Cigarette companies created all this out of thin air. That's what the industry does. So with Burzynski, it was fascinating. They created the Skeptical Peoples for the Protection of Cancer Patients, and organizations like this, and create websites, and they picket, and they show up to my screenings and protest, just like Trump hires all politicians, by the way, not just Trump. I don't care why. I'm not getting into politics here. All politicians hire fake people to show up at their campaigns and fake people to protest. They do the same stuff. The industry does the same thing. The politicians are just, in fact, the industry was doing it before the politicians figured it out. Politicians are just learning from what industry has learned to do. So, I don't know. I could go on and on about this as well, but it's a fascinating world. To me, I'm less angry about it. I'm honestly like a spectator, I feel like now. Maybe that's my coping mechanism. I mean, I'm not pretending I'm trying to sound insensitive, but as a spectator, if you just kind of mentally put yourself there and go, let's see how these guys are going to react to this. And it's funny, is you think you can predict what they're going to do, and it's usually worse than what you thought they're going to do. You know what I mean? It's crazy. There have been doctors that have been killed, But, it's interesting. I'm going to ramble about this for a minute, going back to the controversy and everything. Inevitably, with the success of my movies, some Hollywood people will start knocking on your door. And this is interesting, going back to how hard this is. I won't go on and on about this, give too many details, because this is still ongoing. I don't want to blow anything that might be happening. But some people that are very well established in the television and movie industry, I've been in communication with them for a while. Meetings have been occurring to where, imagine a show like House of Cards, where you have this evil president and his evil wife and all these evil people, but you kind of love them, And it takes place in the sort of the heart of politics. Imagine if you did that, but FDA and pharma. And imagine one season had to do with somebody that, I don't know, cure for cancer, or another season had to do with this. And so I'm working on that. And with some really powerful people, and we've been working on it for a while. It's really exciting. Problem is, everybody's scared of that too. They're like, this is amazing. This is going to be huge. Oh, wait. Okay, they won't let us do it. Next place. No, they won't let us do it. No, we can't do it. But it's totally fictional. It's all made up. No, they won't let us do it. We can't do it. So we can't even make a fictional version of this to make it mainstream, So anyway, but again, I try to look at it as a spectator going, wow, I kind of know, wow, this is really something huge that I've stumbled upon. Even, you can't even make a make-believe version of this that people can see. They don't even want that on, on people's radar. So, yeah. Let me tell you another quick one. I was living in New York, and Dateline. Suzanne Summers had written a book, and she included Burzynski in this thing. She had written a book about a couple of physicians, and Burzynski was in it. And of course, it's like a hot potato. Oh my God, Suzanne Summers, here she goes again. It's like, so it's easy for the media to make fun of this and then feature her because she's famous and blah, blah, blah. So Dateline wanted to do a special on her, and they contacted Burzynski because she's in the book. Burzynski's smart. He's like, I'm not talking to you. He said, you want to talk to me? You meet this guy, Eric. And I hadn't released the movie yet again. He said, I want you to let this guy, he's in New York, let him see my movie. He will show you his movie about me that he's working on. Instead of me spending a month or longer, the time it would take to explain to you what's really going on here, he did a pretty good job doing it in 2 hours. So I go to 30 Rock, I sit down, one of the head producers of Dateline. I walk by Brian Jennings' desk or whatever. I'm in 30 Rock and MSNBC in the area and all that. And I sit in a room in this little office and I play the movie. And I wasn't going to give her a copy. I bring it with me and I took it home with me. She cries during the movie, during the part with some of the kids who are in Congress with their parents. And if you see the movie, you'll see. And she was kind of flabbergasted by what she just experienced. Because kind of like Ralph at Sloan Kettering, where he's assumed it was a bunch of nonsense, so he learned the truth. She had that moment with me, I could tell. She was like, oh, this is Susan Summers, ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And there's some Polish cancer guy and probably a quack, And then she sees my movie and goes, oh, God. So I walk to the elevator with her. And I never forget. I remember she pushes the button. And I go, look. And I can't remember. I can't remember her name. But I just said, look, I know you're Dateline. I know, that you have a job to do. But, I really just plead with you. Just give this guy a fair chance. Just saying that this guy is unproven, just saying this guy is a quack, or I'm sorry, you saw that, you can prove. The FDA says it works. They've approved the trials. He's been approved for phase 3, and she just kind of looks and she goes, I really like to do the right thing here. My bosses are not going to let that happen. And the elevator doors open and off I go. Yeah. She was candid, and I emailed her back and forth. I mean, at least she was honest. At least she wasn't completely going to bullshit me, And that was fascinating, I didn't have anything recorded or anything, but yeah. And one more quick one, since I'm on this subject, because you're bringing back a lot of old memories. Again, before the AstroTurfers came out of the woodwork, came after us so badly, MSNBC saw it. And I actually got an agent for a while. I was in a film festival in Jersey. And an agent who had gone on to do some big stuff. He's mentioned in a lot of the Academy Awards now, thanks to, I can't remember his name. But he helped that Japanese movie about dolphins, that documentary, that really famous one. What's that called? Whatever. Anyway, The Cove. He even worked on it. He's a big dude, and he even bigger since he knew me. I don't want to say his name. It's okay. Anyway, but he represented me because he said, look, this is a great project. I'm not going to sign you. Let's see if we can sell it. And I understand where he's coming from. He's a businessman. He saw that this is going to be a tough one. He's not going to sign this guy with one movie. But he gets the only organization that really showed a lot of interest was incredibly MSNBC. So back to 30 Rock I go, MSNBC. This is after the movie had come out, after Dateline. And I'm thinking, okay, these guys have advertisements. They do like documentaries on prisons and like, you know. So I go in and there's this big conference room. There's a lot of them. And I was just by myself. And it was almost like, it was like a bunch of executives on this side and this side. And I go in and sit down. And the guy actually says to me, the one guy at the head of the table goes, honestly, Eric, I wanted to just have you come in so I can meet you for myself and make sure you weren't a nut job. Because I saw this movie and I'm thinking, how could this possibly be? How could I live in the country that this happens? You know, we really are seriously considering finding a way to get this on our television network. I'm like, wow, okay. So all this back and forth. They're like, okay, we need you to whittle it down to 44 minutes. This is a 2-hour movie. 44 minutes to fit with commercials on an hour block. You know, I even got a budget approved. They were going to pay me to like deal with it. And all these weeks and go by and all this back and forth. And finally, one of my biggest supporting producers in this whole scenario sort of sheepishly calls me. She says, we can't do it, Eric. We all love this project. Legal will not let us do this. Our pharmaceutical advertisers will be so pissed if we air this. Yeah, so, yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, but, yeah.
Eric, what exactly are the benefits of fetal stem cells, and how many different versions of stem cell therapy are there?
Sure. The benefits it's a complicated one. So, and I'm always going to, like I have been answering every question, I have to kind of start from the beginning. So, all stem cells do they regenerate. So you and I, as we're sitting here, they're working on stuff right now. I think somebody once said we wouldn't live an hour if it weren't for our own stem cells. So like if you sprain your ankle, cut your hand, whatever, those are your stem cells partially coming out to regenerate that injury. And of course, even if you're not injured, you know, this is like sort of your body's defense mechanism against you name it. So obviously that beautiful thing that we have in us, what a great idea for a therapy if you can figure out how to manipulate that. So, but you know, the first stem cell therapy ever created was actually the bone marrow transplant. This is actually stem cells. That's all it is. It's just taking entire bone marrow, because by the way, a lot of our stem cells are laying dormant in our bone marrow. So when you get sick or whatever, there's often your stem cells are coming out of your bone marrow and just going out throughout your body. So I'm going to get to fetal, I promise, but so you have bone marrow transplantation, right? Now what's interesting is, even though adult stem cell, there's adult, which they take it from you and then they give it back to you after they waken them up. You have umbilical cord stem cells, which can be done in a host of different ways. You either save them at birth for your kid, maybe you access them later, or there's a lot of people trying to do clinical trials and other organizations where they're giving umbilical to other people that aren't necessarily your umbilical cord. You have embryonic stem cells, which I can get into in a minute, which are highly dangerous and are often confused with fetal, not in the same room as fetal, but they sound similar, not the same. And you have like so many other stem cell types out there. Like then you have something called amniotic, from the amniotic fluid. They're not stem cells, by the way. You'll see ads for them. You'll see them in magazines. They're a freeze-dried, dead amniotic product that they wake up, or they thaw out and they stick into you. They have some decent results, but you're not going to turn Parkinson's around with it or anything like that. But anyway, it's just important to bring that up because it's not a stem cell at all. But they love putting stem cells after it because most of the public doesn't understand what the heck a stem cell is to begin with. So it's really easy to manipulate people and when they don't know what the hell they're looking at. And again, that's kind of part of my job again with this space is to help people understand that. So while I did focus on fetal, I spent a lot of time helping people understand the differences of the types, why some are quote unquote better than others, and why some have more limitations than others, and why fetal, in my opinion, is sort of like this, like the Rolls Royce in the parking lot surrounded by horse and buggies, as I had mentioned earlier. So if you have a sports injury, say, adult stem cells where they take it from your fat or your bone marrow and they wake them up and give them back to you, there's something wrong with it. I mean, that's probably some good results. A lot of sports stars get it. But you gotta remember, I'm 46, so if I underwent adult stem cell therapy, they're taking out my 46-year-old stem cells from my blood, basically. It's just blood cells. You wake them up, and you have to hope that they become a muscle cell for my sprained whatever. Or let's say I had a heart issue. You have to hope your 46-year-old blood stem cell becomes a heart cell or a brain cell or whatever your ailment might be. And that's the same goes for umbilical, except that's only 9 months old versus your age. But with fetal, harvested at end of first trimester. I know it's hard for people to wrap their head around, but one of the 50 million voluntary abortions on the planet every year, that's where they come from. You're getting brain cells, liver cells, heart cells. You're getting the whole package. And I'll get to efficacy in a minute, but because they're capable at the time when they're harvested, in this case, of not experiencing a genetic rejection, you'd think, oh my gosh, you're putting foreign DNA in you, your body's just going to kick that right out. Not with fetal, taken at the right time of gestation. That's why adult works, because it's taking it from you, giving it back to you. Umbilical cord, they're experimenting with that, but there are a lot of people getting sick from experimenting with somebody else's umbilical cord, giving it to some other adult. So, but for whatever reason, these guys have figured it out that at the end of first trimester, there's no genetic, there's no rejection. And because of that, if harvested properly, you can imagine the difference in results of positive results with fetal for a myriad of diseases versus adult or something else. Since we're on this tangent here, fetal is like a void. Like you go to Google and you type in fetal and you'll get embryonic. You'll watch a documentary about stem cells, you won't find fetal. You'll read books about it. Where's fetal? If you don't know about fetal, you would never know it even existed. You'll have articles that think they're talking about fetal, but it's actually embryonic, because most journalists don't understand it. Most journalists are just doing their job. They got the next assignment. Oh, I got to do a thing about this stem cell thing, and they do it. And they do a good job as much as they could, but they don't have the experience that I have, and certainly not what a scientist has, to understand a very complicated, convoluted, and up-and-coming technology. So fetal, embryonic. Embryonic cell is a 5-day-old blastocyst grown in a petri dish in a lab by taking a sperm and an egg and putting it together. There's no organs being formed. It's a 5-day-old blastocyst. It doesn't even really know where it's going. You know what I mean? A fetal stem cell, when harvested properly, already has organs. It's just like a thing, right? An embryonic cell, 5 days old, fetal, 7 to 12 weeks. Embryonic has been known repeatedly. There are some people using it, not in America, not on any wide scale, but you can go to Tijuana, you can go to all kinds of places to get this. People have been known to grow teratomas. It's a non-cancerous tumor. A lot of weird stuff will grow in you if you get injected with embryonic stem cells. It's not funny, but you're talking about something that's like a few cells that you're putting into another human being. Are you insane? Like, you have no idea what's going to happen. But it sounds fancy, right? So I'm getting off track here, but anyway, but fetal is not that. It is separate. The media gets confused by the two, and that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to do this movie, to kind of help clear that air. In my personal opinion, my humble opinion, not being a doctor, not being a scientist, just a journalist, living in this space for 5 years, I've never seen results in any other stem cell type like I've seen in fetal. And when you understand the mechanism of action, you understand where they come from, you understand why, it makes absolutely logical sense. So if you have brain damage or you have a stroke or whatever, and you get fetal cells with neuronal cells and you have improvement, you understand why that happens. While the same patient may have gotten adult and has no improvement. Well, because the adult cells didn't have any neuronal cells, and of course you're trying to fix the neuronal system, duh, you know what I mean? Same with like easy ones like liver disease, you're getting liver cells given to you. I don't know if you saw my talk, but the first patient they ever treated before they had a clinic was a kid who had bone marrow failure from aplastic anemia, who was living off of blood transfusions, waiting for a bone marrow transplant just to survive. And he got this because his parents bought radiated milk from a milk farm from Chernobyl, that part of the world. Bone marrow failure, waiting on a bone marrow transplant. And they gave him 2 rounds of fetal liver cells only. They had not really developed the whole protocol yet. Cured him. He's still alive today. I showed pictures of him, in today's talk. So try doing that with adult cells. Try doing that with anything that's stem cell related, except for a bone marrow transplant, which is you need a match. It's highly invasive. You have to bring the body to the brink of death with all these, you have to bring the immune system down so the body will take it. And they just stuck this in this kid's arm. And, I'm not saying that this can replace bone marrow transplants, nor are they, but in this case, it worked because they couldn't get one. They didn't have a match. They were waiting. So, yeah, that isn't a good example. I mean, again, a lot of these patients, though, that go to MCell and go to get fetal, they've already tried the adult route. They tried all of it, and it didn't work. And they go to MCell and it works, But it doesn't work for everybody. It's not a magic bullet for anything. But that's sort of like the quick overview of the different types and, and why fetal is clearly superior. What's also interesting, too, is when I interviewed the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, these top dog stem cell guys, and they were willing to talk openly about their struggles with the FDA and all that, but I'd bring up fetal, and they've only talked about it off camera. And actually, it's funny, Carl, who's a Parkinson's patient, who's one of the patients I presented, who might be in my sequel, but I've just kind of been following him on a personal level, because we both live in Southern California. He was telling me that he decided to go to like this stem cell meeting thing. I don't know how he found out about it, but he was in the audience of like a bunch of doctors and scientists, and he kind of like sat in the back. Like I think it was with his dad or whatever. And he listened to the whole lecture, just like I was saying, not one mention of fetal. They didn't even mention what type of stem cells they're talking about. It was just stem cells can do this and stem cells can do that. Because Carl saw my movie and he knew how to ask the right questions. He just went, okay, what type of stem cells are we talking about? And they're like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. He goes, what about, okay, which one's the best stem cell? And then no cameras roll. And they go, fetal, clearly fetal. He said, well, why aren't we doing fetal? And he said, no one can answer that question. Everybody just sat silent. So again, I don't really have a conclusion to the story, but then he would corner the scientists later, and they just kept skirting around it. They won't face it. And again, it's just one of those, and I think it's just the abortion issue. It's just, But since I talked about that, I want to say it again. 50 million abortions every year. And I think the time I've been sitting here almost an hour with you today, or the time I was on that stage, 8,000 or 9,000 fetuses were aborted in the time we've been hanging out, or the time I was on that stage. So there is no shortage of this. And a lot of people not a lot of people, some people like to say, oh, you're killing fetuses on purpose, that's how evil. Oh, women are getting pregnant on purpose to get a fetal cell. How absurd. None of this is possible. So it's like, even if we try to like harvest every fetus possible that was aborted every day, we could never keep up. There are so many of them. I don't mean to talk lightly of it, but the idea, I can't help but to get defensive about it, because the idea that anybody would want to get pregnant on purpose to have an abortion is just absurd. Secondly, doing it on purpose in any respect, absurd. Not when you have this overflowing abundance in this world of this fetal material. It's everywhere. And one of the examples I used was, you could hate abortion, that's your right, but you're not going to stop it. I can hate guns, that's my right. I'm not going to stop guns anytime soon. There's going to be more guns tomorrow than there are today. There's going to be abortions tomorrow than there are today. That's how it is. So guns kill people, but abortions can save lives. Unfortunately, that's just a hard truth, So what's more immoral? Throwing them into the garbage repeatedly, or, whoa, don't put that in the garbage. Let's see this to these clever scientists and see if we can help somebody with it. It's going to go there anyway, right? Yeah. Yeah, and to take it a step further, because they're in such abundance, the fetal material, if MCell sees anything wrong with it, even if it's a perfectly clean batch of material with all bacteria, no viruses, nothing, if it maybe isn't quite viable enough, maybe it didn't make it over to the lab fast enough, they'll just toss it. Because they can, because there's such an abundance of them. They'll toss 40% of them. They don't So which also kind of says a lot, because they can pick from the most viable, the most valuable, the greatest possible material they can get their hands on. They don't need to, get, less. What is the word I'm looking for? They don't need to, go for second best and marginalize themselves just to keep their business. No, I mean they're doing fine. They got plenty of it flying in. It's unfortunate. I don't mean to talk so lightly about it.
No,
but,
I understand.
yeah,
Like you said, it's getting thrown away either way.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. So.
Yeah.